Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a very pleasant Tuesday afternoon here in suburban Chicago. It's about 4 o'clock. The sun is setting in the west, and the air is a nice, cool, I would say, high 30s, low 40s Fahrenheit, meaning I'm wearing my winter hat, no gloves. My hands are a little on the chilly side, but not outrageously so. Glad to be heading home after a good day of teaching. Looking forward to going to my game club tonight and to talking to you fine people. Before I get too far in, I did want to take a moment to encourage you to listen all the way to the end of the episode. We here at Rattlebox Games, my design partner Rob and I, have a new creative venture that we're doing. It's mostly Rob working on it, but at some point I may be helping. It's called Nightly Morning News. Nightly with a K. The premise is it is a news broadcast from a fantasy medieval world being narrated by a friendly newscaster. The goal is to bring it out every day. It's 2 minutes long, and it's formatted in a way that you can listen to it while you're brushing your teeth. That's part of the premise there, because you're supposed to brush your teeth for 2 minutes. So if you start brushing your teeth during the little chime at the beginning and stop when the gong rings, you'll have brushed your teeth for the dentist recommended 2 minutes, which Rob and I both agree is the longest 2 minutes of the day. So you might as well listen to some funny podcast while you do. It's available already for download from Spreaker or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm going to include an advertisement for it at the end of this episode, and I will do so regularly from now on. Not every episode, but every few. There'll be an advertisement for it either in the middle of the episode or at the beginning or at the end. You never know where it'll come. But as a heads up, that's what that is. I guess you are going to have to start listening to ads, but it'll just be the one, perhaps. So that's Nightly Morning News. Perhaps I'll put in the advertisement at some point. If I have an episode run short, I'll just put the whole episode of Nightly Morning News in there so you can get a taste of it. But all right, enough business. So today, continuing my effort to think a little bit more about the kinds of ideas or kinds of things I can bring to this podcast that aren't done all that often other places. I was thinking about today in one of my writing classes, I had students working on social media posts do a project where they imagine the social media account for a fictional character. The idea is they're supposed to pick a character they're familiar with and enjoy and come up with some social media posts on their behalf. It's a relatively easy rhetorical analysis and creative post project. But it got me thinking a little bit. One of the things I'm asking them to do is identify the purpose and goals that this character might pursue. What is it that they would want out of their social media channel? And this is the place where I found some interest along with in expanding on a brainstorming idea I had written in my notebook a long time ago. So in that regard, what I'm going to do today is pick out a couple fictional texts that don't immediately scream to me board game material and think about what a board game might look like that would play that material well and how it would capture the spirit of the game. Because the spirit of the game is the challenge. I think coming up with a board game that's centered on a theme is easy enough, but it's how would the game capture the spirit of the theme that would be really interesting. Just as a heads up, I'm walking by a bush full of birds. I don't know if you heard that, but in case you didn't, those are some birds. I don't know what kind of birds they are. I'm no birdologist. Okay. So I thought I would start this fall, in October, I believe. They are releasing a cinema version of the Broadway play Hamilton. Hamilton is, of course, the smash hit musical that premiered in New York and has since been on Broadway and on Broadway and other places quite a bit. My wife and I saw it here in Chicago, and it was incredible. If you're somebody who likes musicals or even just likes good music, I think Hamilton is worth looking at. But I was thinking, what would a Hamilton board game be? And of course, I'm not interested in like a Hamilton party game where you get a line and where it's some sort of trivia game or something. But really, what would a hobby board game set around the theme of Hamilton be? So to start with the story, in case you aren't familiar with it, is loosely based on a famous biography of Alexander Hamilton that focuses on a couple main themes. First off, it's his desire for achievement / recklessness / hubris. That Hamilton had a very rough childhood in which a lot of people who loved him died, and he ended up really having to strive hard and learn to write well and write fast. And so the implication of the musical, at least, is that Hamilton made his way out of his meager upbringings through his writing. And throughout the play, it's his writing and his skill at debate that become his strongest asset. The secondary thing is Hamilton is driven by hubris, that he is an immensely proud man. He seeks to keep what he has and defend honor. And that becomes a running theme through the show. And then finally, the third one is recklessness. That Hamilton, because of his impetuousness and the speed that he writes at and his need to defend his honor, he also becomes very reckless. And that recklessness, of course, proves to be his downfall in a lot of ways. Now, within the film, there are a couple antagonists, people that keep Hamilton from getting what he wants. In particular, Thomas Jefferson proves to be a long-term foe to Hamilton in the political arena. But even more consequential is his rivalry with Aaron Burr. Early on, he and Burr are friends in the play. And as life goes on, Burr becomes more and more irritated, jealous, and angry because Hamilton is everything Burr wants to be and cannot be. That Hamilton is reckless where Burr is careful. Hamilton is bold where Burr is cautious. Hamilton is successful where Burr is not. And ultimately, Burr kills Hamilton in a duel. Sorry for spoiling that for you. You've had a couple hundred years to learn the history, I guess. So I was thinking about Hamilton, the play, musical, and I was wondering what would a hobby board game trying to capture the spirit of Hamilton be? And I was thinking I thought about history. Of course, the game would have to capture history in important ways. One approach could be the approach of the Prospero Hall, where the story could be told in parts. That's what they did with Jaws. They basically came up with two different games that you play in two parts, and one part influences the next. But the goal would be to enact various elements of the game in this two-part format. But the goal of the history is to engage with that story of recklessness, of love, of hubris. I mean, recklessness and hubris speak to me as games of chance, games of pushing your luck. And of course, pushing your luck is a key part of what Hamilton did. And sometimes it would fail him and sometimes it would succeed. It caused as many troubles as it allowed for. I mean, the big challenge, of course, of making a game out of history is that the history has already happened. And so the question is, where are the significant choices that the players get to make as they reenact that history? Because if the history has already happened and we know what's supposed to happen, how do the players get to choose things? I mean, one option would be to infuse the game to pick a spot. I would say this is the way that game designers often deal with history is they pick a moment, right? For instance, I have the Martin Wallace game Gettysburg, or Lincoln. I have the Martin Wallace game Lincoln, which is mostly about the Civil War, right? And as we talked about last time, game design is about leaving out things. In this case, they leave out most of the things Lincoln has to do and just focus on the movement of military troops. So from that regard, the question would be, which part of Hamilton's life would be best suited to a hobby board game? Perhaps it could be the Continental Congress. Hamilton gets elected to be the junior senator from New York to go to the Continental Congress, and he shows up and wants to institute an all-new financial system that they've never had before. And of course, people from the South don't like it, as we learn from the song. And Hamilton gets in arguments with people, but ultimately he doesn't have the votes. So he learns to compromise, and he and Jefferson and Madison make a deal that gets him what he wants. So perhaps one approach to the game would be to make the negotiation of the Continental Congress the turning point for that history. Build a game around the legislative choices of the Continental Congress. The military history always becomes an option as well. Hamilton was well established as part of Lafayette's crew in the military, so perhaps he would help out at the Battle of Yorktown or something like that. But then again, that doesn't feel like a game about Hamilton then. It feels like, in either of those cases, that feels like a game about the Continental Congress, a game about the Battle of Yorktown. So, the alternate possibility, the other place you could go would be to focus on the emotions of Hamilton without necessarily focusing on the plot elements. Hamilton's reckless approach to life, his pushing the luck of his various elements, his feeling like he's running out of time, perhaps there's an element there to be the element of sort of trying to establish his goals by pushing your luck. So perhaps Hamilton becomes a cooperative game then, in which players play different scenarios trying to solve the problems of Hamilton's life, right? Like the early scenario would be getting out of the islands where he was raised. I forget which island it was, Jamaica maybe. And you have to figure out how to gain enough social capital that you could leave. I don't know what the co-op part would be then. Maybe Hamilton is a solo game, but then you might as well just read the book. Not that playing a solo game can't be fun, but a campaign solo game designed to have you win by matching history's narrative feels subpar. But perhaps there's an element of the emotion movie. What's it called? The Pixar movie where they're the emotions. Inside Out. Perhaps there's an element of Inside Out where each player plays one of, say, 4 positive attributes of Hamilton's life. His ambition, his intelligence, his wit, and ambition, intelligence, wit. I can't think of a 4th. But then attached to those positive attributes could be negative things, right? Like ambition could turn to hubris, intelligence could turn to rage, or naivete. Naivete would be good because he was sort of a country bumpkin. So even though he was very smart, people saw him as kind of a fool. And his wit, the opposite side of his wit, could be rage or hubris or embarrassment, that sort of thing. So maybe it's a 3-person game. Each player plays one of those 3 emotions, and you try to work together somehow to advance the story through manipulating different events in Hamilton's life while avoiding the things that cause each player to lose control, that the negative consequences could stack up. And then maybe in succeeding in getting Hamilton off the island, then you have the Hamilton engaging Hamilton in the war, Hamilton in courtship, Hamilton in the Continental Congress, the downfall of Hamilton, Hamilton in the duel. So I could see like a 5-chapter game where players are manipulating the board state to try to succeed at a series of tasks that are plot related, and in succeeding at those tasks they build up their possibility of completing the scenario in a positive way. The problem is, to have that be an interesting story, I don't know how you build in possibility, right? It is very difficult. I mean, it could just be you're trying to solve the puzzle in a way that lets you win. And maybe that's the fun part, but I don't know how it's variable then. This is a tough nut to crack. But I think that idea that I talked about, a co-op game where Hamilton's life is broken into a series of chapters, and in trying to solve the puzzle of that chapter through the game elements, you advance the story. That might be an interesting way to look at the life of Hamilton as a game. But I suspect that people would critique it as having a pace-it-on theme in a really pretty dramatic way, because it sounds like it has a pace-it-on theme, which is not ideal, but perhaps necessary. Well, I was intending to do a couple different stories, but perhaps what we're looking at is a deep dive of the relationship between narrative component and game state, and an imagination of what a game might be based on a movie property. So, I'd be really curious to hear, did you enjoy this idea? Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know. I'll post a thread there. I'm curious to did you find this entertaining? Would you want to hear more episodes like this, where I'm pondering game design questions in the context of media properties that I find interesting? This seems like a fruitful and productive topic. It seems like it fits my aptitude pretty well, but if the audience doesn't like it, I probably ought not keep doing it. So pop over to Board Game Geek 3269 Guild and let me know what you think. I hope that you've enjoyed your walk today. I've enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Good day, friends.
Good morning, entities, ladies, gentlemen, beasts, and pan-planar quasi-real psychic manifestations. I am Sir Timlock Bumbleglaive, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Nightly Morning News. An exciting new news report delivered directly into your consciousness by the Propaganda Committee of the Mind Flare Criers Guild. The Nightly Morning News is a 2-minute news report perfectly timed to give you the news thou needest to know to starteth thine day. If you begin brushing your teeth, fangs, or tusks at the chime of the bell, and stop at the sounding of the gong, you will have brushed according to the dental dictates established by the Clerics Guild of Drag, as inspired by a strange pamphlet seemingly written by a mysterious organization calling themselves the American Dental Association, seen through a momentary interdimensional rift in the Clerics Guild headquarters. We look forward to sharing this exciting new program with you starting tomorrow morning. Until then, be well, my fellow citizens of Drag. Brought to you by
Rattlebox Games.